Asia, Bithynia, who have not been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, through the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Jesus Christ and sprinkled in his blood. Grace and peace be yours in abundance. Praise be to the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you.
Thank you very much. This was on my heart and mind from Sunday night forward, so I wanted to share it with you about hope. As what Peter writes, when he is writing to these people that he shared with us, that life is very difficult for them. It's extremely difficult for them. They're being persecuted in a lot of different ways. And one of the, well, if you were a Christian, you got caught. You had three choices, I believe. You could get dipped in oil and burn at night, to light up the streets of Rome. You could be crucified, or you could be impaled. Or if they chose to get you involved in some of their athletic contests, you could be thrown out into the arena with the lions. Okay? So these people are having a very difficult time, and I think we're gradually seeing, not to that extreme yet, but we're gradually seeing our society turn its back on Christianity as far as persecuting the Christians. That's happening in places that maybe we don't read, maybe we're not concerned about that. But as I understand it, in most parts of Syria, there are no Christians anymore. They've either been killed or they have been run off. I don't know about in Egypt, but they're trying to cleanse all of Egypt of Christians, what they call the Coptic Christians. And it just goes on and on and on. Many places we could talk about here. So what happens here is Peter writes that he wants to give these people hope. He wants to let them know that no matter what they're going through right now, that there is hope beyond that. You know, it's kind of like the story of Linus and Lucy and Peanuts, and they're sitting there watching TV, and Lucy says to Linus, "Go get me a glass of water." And he said, "Why should I? What have you ever done for me?" She said, "I'll tell you what, if you'll give me a glass of water when you're 75 years old, I'll bake you a birthday cake." So Linus gets up, he's walking in the other room, and he says, "Life is a lot easier when you know you have something to look forward to." That's what hope is. Looking forward no matter what we're going through. And I think many times we get ourselves in a position where we're looking at our circumstances, not looking at God. We're looking at the situation which we're in. We're not looking beyond that, what God can do. So the example I want to share with you is in the life of Peter. I don't know how much you know about Peter, but very quickly we're going to go through just a few verses of Scripture that are different incidents, different experiences in the life of Peter, and see what his response was. Okay, now this is what we're going to go through here very quickly. In Luke chapter 5 is when Jesus comes. We can harmonize it with the calling of the disciples in Matthew chapter 4. But Luke gives us a little more information about what's going on here. So they have just been fishing all night long. They didn't catch anything. Jesus says, "Go throw your nets back out." And Peter says, "Since you told us to do it, Lord, that's what we'll do." And they go out and they catch all these fish. Okay? And then, if you read that, you'll see where Peter calls Jesus Master at the beginning, but at the end he calls him Lord. That he has this revelation of some kind, that this Jesus is someone that's extremely, extremely superior. So he bows down before Jesus and said, "Get away from me, Lord, because I'm a sinful man." Okay? So when in this particular instance, what do you think he's feeling at that moment? What do you think Peter is thinking at the moment he bows before Jesus? If he will accept him? Anybody else?
Feeling that he's not worthy.
Not worthy, okay. Humility. He's bowed before Jesus. He knows he shouldn't be there, and now he is going to honor him for who he really is. The next we see in Matthew chapter 16, that Peter makes this great confession. You know, Jesus says, "Who do people say I am?" And Peter, the disciples say, "Well, some say you're John the Baptist, Jeremiah, one of the prophets." And then he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And what was Peter's great confession? "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." But folks, it's just a few verses later when Jesus says to the disciples, "I'm going to be put to death and crucified." And Peter runs out and says, "No, Lord, never." And then what does Jesus say to Peter? Yeah, get behind me, Satan. For the things you're concerned about are the things of God, of man, not the things of God. Okay? So here, what do you think Peter's feeling? I mean, this is going to be a roller coaster ride here. Desi didn't want to miss my sermon. What do you think Peter's feeling? At the very beginning, when he makes that great confession, what do you think he's feeling? If you don't talk, this will be a long sermon. What do you think? Never mind over there, that side. We just got to be on top of the world. Look what, because Jesus says that my Father revealed this to you. But then the next thing that happens is he's going to be at the bottom of the pit. Because what did Jesus call him? Satan. Okay? That he's interfering with the will of God. You ever felt that way? And sometimes, boy, you're on top of the world, and other times you're way down here. Okay? We're getting to the point of what this is about. In Matthew chapter 14, this is the occasion that Peter walks on the water. And he walks out in his faith, and he steps and he walks on the water. Then what happens? He looks away from Jesus, sees the way that things, begins to sink. Okay? And has to call out for Jesus to save him. What would the emotion be that Peter would have then? Fear? What? Okay. You're maybe a little embarrassment. I made this big claim to walk out there. Have you ever done anything that you thought you were ready to do and got so embarrassed by what you did? Okay. Dan, you're like a daily basis, isn't it? Yeah, okay. In John chapter 6, verse 68, 69, this is where he has preached the bread of life sermon. There's 3 different sermons he preaches there, and it comes to the end, and when he offers this to the people, and they understand what Jesus is saying, that these people got up and left. And the only people left are the 12 apostles. And Jesus said, are you guys going to leave too? Joe's paraphrase. And Peter says, where would we go? You have the words of eternal life. And Jesus blesses him, and there's a few other things we're not going to get into right now. But what would Peter be feeling at this moment? That he makes this great confession, probably even greater than he did at Caesarea Philippi. What would you feel if you were able to come up with the right words in the right situation and say exactly what God wants you to say? Relieved? Joy? Okay, maybe a little pride works in there too, that I was the one that could do that. Matthew chapter 26, 31 through 35. After making his great confession to Jesus that he would die, he denies Jesus 3 times. Okay? How would you feel if you were Peter at the end of that? Because what happens here, folks, is that he denies Jesus, the rooster crows, and Jesus dies. What if the last thing that you did for Jesus was the worst thing you could have done for Jesus? You used an oath, you cursed, and said, I don't even know the man. And then you hear that rooster crow, then the words of Jesus. And one of those things, I think it's in Luke, is that at that moment Jesus turned and their eyes meet. How would you feel, Dan? Oh, my goodness. Failure. Have you ever felt like a failure? Daily basis again, you and I, okay? Sure we have. We've all gone through those things. We're not any different. In Luke chapter 22, Jesus warns him. Satan wants to sift you like weed. He wants to find out what's really inside of you, Peter. So what does Jesus say? And after you have come back, he knows he's going to fail this. I want you to encourage the people. Okay? He knew it. He knew it, that it was coming, and still he failed there. I'm sure all of us can, in some way, sense what's going through Peter in these different experiences. In Mark 16:7, the last thing you did to Jesus was deny you knew him, and at the resurrection, Mark 16:7, Jesus says, tell the disciples and Peter that I'm going to Galilee. What would that do to you?
Made him feel like he was not included.
Yeah. Little joy again, isn't there? Oh wow, he remembered me. He hasn't kicked me out. There is still hope. And then finally we get to John 21. that they're on the shore and Jesus is there and he has this conversation with Peter, and 3 times he says to Peter, "Do you love me?" Now, I'm not getting deep into this because there's more to it than that. But the last time it says Peter was struck to the heart. He broke Peter's heart. What would you feel like at that moment? Not the greatest, right, friends? It all comes back. All that he's done. The good, the bad, everything comes back. And we have all experienced those things in our lives, have we not? When things were going pretty well, things were not bad, failures that we have felt, the successes we thought we would have. Life gets very difficult. We find out that we have not been the person that we really knew we were supposed to be, and we find ourselves there. How do you think Peter felt in the midst of these events? And we're going to look at the experiences of life that Peter went through. You know, one of the things that I want to get across to you, that we look at Peter, and he failed probably as more times than he did the right thing, but God never gave up on him. Jesus never drop-kicked him out of the circle of believers that was there. That he is going to work in the life of Peter, and he'll do the same thing for us. He has had good times, he had bad times, he had ups and downs, he was very inconsistent. Does that remind you of anybody you know? At times we do the right thing, at times we just absolutely blow the whole thing. We were so wrong in what we said or what we did. So Peter writes to these people to say there's hope. I went through it, folks. You know, sometimes we believe that these people that God uses in the Bible are these perfect people that always did the right thing, always said the right thing, had perfect faith. Not at all. Next week on my 7 o'clock program, we're going to talk about Gideon. When God called Gideon, Gideon didn't want to go. He called him mighty warrior, and Gideon basically says, "You talking to me? I'm hiding from the Midianites, and you're calling me this great warrior." So there's hope for us that we can come back to God, and he's going to see us through that. And when Peter writes 1 Peter and 2 Peter, these are messages of hope to people that are going through a really tough time. And if there's one thing, I think this is why the Lord put this on my heart last week. Lord, we live in a world that needs hope from somewhere. Because it seems like very quickly it's going the other way. We need to know that there's still hope. In 1 Peter chapter 3, you can read that for yourself. But what he is saying to us is, I failed. When I denied Jesus 3 times, I failed. But don't you do the same thing that I did. And sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts. And always be ready to give an answer with hope that lies within you. That is what he is wanting us to see in the midst of this. And there's going to be several passages through 1 and 2 Peter that's going to ring a bell about Peter's life, where he failed. And he is saying, please don't do the same thing. But even when we do, there's hope. And there's going to be hope that we can see that. In this time of crisis, in a time of the greatest moment of Peter's life, he failed completely. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Denies he even knows him. The same guy he said, I die for you, Jesus. And when he gets right down in the midst of it, he blows the whole thing. And then what happens? Jesus dies. Have you ever been in that situation? You could have, you should have, and now there's no chance to. But in the midst of that, there's still hope. There's still hope if we put hope in the right person. The bitterness of defeat, the pain of failure. And then, as I said earlier, that look from Jesus when their eyes met. We probably have experienced that with our parents, have we not? Now, Judy said she was perfect. Is that true? Just shake your head. Because we know that. Okay. But we've all been in that spot. Yes?
God controls the whole situation. All that through to show him the result in the end.
Oh, absolutely. That's where the hope comes in. Right?
That's where he's ready to keep it going.
Yeah. See, people will tell us, I'll love you if you do this. God says, I love you even though you do this. Right? And that's where the hope comes in. The hope is not based on my ability, my strength, my faith. The hope is based on him. If you read those verses, kept by the power of God. It's not, we put our hope in the wrong things. I see that all the time. We put our hope in money. We put our hope in material things. We put our hope in our spouses. We put our hope in our parents. all these things. And what happens? We end up what? Disappointed. You know, one of the things I almost always share in the funeral message is that I've been a chaplain for hospice ever since I've been here in Watson. And I've sat in that room when people are having the last moments of their life. And folks, I want you to know that not one time did anyone say, boy, Joe, I wish I had more money. Boy, Joe, I wish I had a nicer home. Not once did they wish for a new car or better clothes. You know what we talked about? God and family. And I learned that many years ago. My goodness, if that's all that's important in the last day of my life, that's all that can be important in life, is those things. That when we place our hope in the things of this world, and it fails us over and over again. And yet look what God does in the life of Peter. Look what God can do, because there's hope. In Acts chapter 2, it is Peter that stands up with the 12 and preaches the first gospel sermon in the book of Acts. It's Peter that gets to go to the house of Cornelius and preach the gospel to the first Gentiles there. In Acts 15, when there's a big church debate, they go to Jerusalem to talk to who? Peter and the apostles. So even though he did all these things wrong, even though he failed in so many times, God is still there. He is still there. And the 1st and 2nd Peter are these messages of hope, or if I can add a little bit, it's a message of hope again. He failed, now there's still that hope that is there. What is hope? See, we use this word incorrectly many times. You know, the clouds are rolling in and we'll say, I hope it doesn't rain today, expecting what? That it's going to. Okay? What is hope? Anybody? Okay? Okay? One, something you hope for. But in the midst of that word hope is this idea of confidence, of an assurance that this is going to happen. That when God gives us this hope, it can be as though it's already happened. I know it's going to. I know that I have all of this, and God is going to help me. But when we look for the experiences in our lives, I saw this sign. I thought this was really neat because it's pretty much as true, isn't it? The trials, the tribulations, the struggles that we go through are always going to be there, and we go through these experiences in life. This world is not the best place. And I think that's why it's like it is, because God wants us to desire something else, something better. Why did you get up this morning? Because you have hope for something better, don't you? If not, there's no reason. You know why I got up this morning? My alarm clock. Well, it hit you. There's a lot of disappointments we go through in life. And it's not so much that, it's what's our response to those disappointments. That's what we have to look at. You know, here again, back to Charlie Brown, and he goes to see Lucy, the psychiatrist, you know, and they're talking. She said, Charlie Brown, if life was an ocean liner, would you set your chair on the front to look out to where you're going, on the sides to where you are, or behind you where you've been? And Charlie says, I can't get my chair unfolded. Have you ever felt that way? And some of the experiences that we get through life, those are things that we're going to see in life, no matter who we are. And there's a failure that we have. So what do we do when we fail? I mean, after we get done with our pity parties, after we get done feeling sorry for ourselves, what do? Get up, try again. But gee, there's a lot of people that don't. They lay down there, and they don't get back up because they have no hope. They don't see that God can work in lives no matter what has happened, no matter what failures we have experienced, that there is hope. We have this guilt, we have this shame, and we've all experienced all of that. But are we just going to lay down or what? Peter speaks of this inheritance. What's inheritance? Inheritance is what my boys think I'm leaving to. What is inheritance?
Something you receive after someone dies.
I'm sorry, louder.
Something you receive after someone dies.
Okay? And see what Peter says, that we have inheritance. This is really kind of funny to me because, believe it or not, I know I look like I'm 30 plus. Sally, what are you laughing about? No. But as of January 1st, I am qualified for Medicare. I'll be 65 in January. So I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with all this stuff. So finally I go see someone that I think that has some knowledge about it. And when we go through this, and he says, what other kind of retirement do you have, Joe, besides Social Security? I said, none. Really? No, that's all I'm looking at. Well, you're going to die poor. And you know what he said? I can't. I can starve to death on the streets of Watsika, but I can't die poor because I have this inheritance. Really? What kind of inheritance? Well, it's through my father and my oldest brother. That he has promised me this inheritance that the world can't get to. It can't spoil, it can't fade, it can't go away. It's solid there. So I can't die poor. Folks, if we believe in Jesus, we can't die poor. We've got this inheritance that God is holding there. You know, we talk about holding on to God. He's holding on to us. It can't spoil. It can't fade. So there's no way that I can die poor if I believe in Jesus. The expectations that we might have. He tells us that this living Christ is the origin of this new birth, of this new hope, this living hope that is there for us, that when we see what is going on around us, kept by the power of God. You see, the joy that we have because of this inheritance, because of this hope, the joy that we have is independent of circumstances in life. See, we start looking at God based upon our circumstance. We need to look at our circumstance based upon God. And He's greater than that circumstance. I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. And He's greater than that. I have this hope because of my belief. There can be trials that are temporarily going to cause us grief and cause us sorrow. But that joy is going to remain there because it does depend on the things of this world. That we are living in a certain hope. And if I have this hope in Christ, it's going to change the way that I live. It's going to transform me because of that hope. I believe later on we'll see that again in Peter. As we get to the end of this here, I just want us to understand that that hope is still very real, even though we get caught up in our own little lives and we don't see it. That we have this inheritance, even though we look at things of the world that we can't see it at times. And this message that Peter has all the way through 1st and 2nd Peter is a message of hope to all of us who need it the most. That there is hope beyond this life. There is hope beyond our failures, our disappointments, our circumstances. And that we need to look to where that hope is at. Not the things of the world, but to the God who is over all these things. To take hold of that living hope through the power of the resurrection of Jesus. There was a young man that was being hazed by his college fraternity. And to be a part of that fraternity, they took him out into the country and they found this well. And they had him hold on to the very end of this greased rope and they lowered him into that well. And he thought, well, they're going to pull me back out. But then he watched them as they tied that rope to the bar and left. So here he is hanging from this rope. And he doesn't know what he's supposed to do because he can't climb up because it's too slippery. So after about 10 minutes, his shoulders, his arms are really starting to ache. And finally, after about a half hour, he just can't hold on anymore. So he lets go and he falls 2 inches to the bottom of the well. Isn't that like us? We'll be holding on to everything we can't let go, and God is there saying, let go. I got this. His fraternity brothers knew exactly what was going to happen. He just fell 2 inches. And for us to have the hope that we're going to have, we need to just let go. Let go. And know that God has this. That it's by His power. It's because of His, who He really is. I don't know if anybody saw this. I bet you wondered what was here for. Did anybody break this? So my question is, how much does this glass of water weigh? Anybody got any? You said 12 ounces. Mary? Don't hold your hand up if you don't have hands.
No, I was just moving my hand. I was holding my hand up. That sounds good to me, 12 ounces.
You see, the weight of this glass of water has nothing to do with it. It's how long I hold this glass of water. Because if I would stand there and hold it for 15 or 20 minutes, it's going to feel heavier than it was before. If I hold it, if I can, and not spill and jump off. It's even when you think. And eventually, if I hold this out, I don't know how long, if anybody wants to try it, you sure can after church, but I don't care how long, it's going to get heavier. Right? Until it's going to get to the point where I can't support it anymore. Right? So, my point is, folks, that we have our disappointments, we have our failures. How long are we going to hold on to them? Because they just get heavier and heavier. All the time that we hold them. That in the midst of this, there is forgiveness from God. In the midst of this, there is a merciful God that would welcome us back. So, how long do we hold on to this? Our guilt, our shame, our disappointments. How long? Because it's getting heavier and heavier. If you do, okay, why not? Take me back. Yeah, I think that's enough. But eventually I'm going to drop it. Because I can't hold it. Whatever there is in your life, eventually you can't hold it. Why waste your time holding it when God has given you the opportunity to take it? He'll forgive us, and we can have that hope. Our hymn of meditation this morning is going to be where He leads me, I will follow. And that's where He's leading us to, folks. Quit carrying it around. Quit having all this burden on your heart and your mind. Just give it to Him. Give it to Him. And you can find this forgiveness. You can find this hope that becomes real to us. A living hope. A living hope. Let's stand together.